The US Navy just announced that any ship suspected of carrying oil, not weapons, not missiles, oil, can now be boarded, searched, and seized. That's not a metaphor. That is the actual legal language coming out of the US Naval Forces Central Command this week. Petroleum products are now classified as contraband under the Hormuz blockade because they, quote, contribute to Iran's war-sustaining economy. Think about what that actually means. The US military has essentially declared that oil itself is a weapon of war, giving itself the authority to intercept any vessel in international waters, regardless of where it's going or who owns it, if they suspect it might end up benefiting Iran. That's not a blockade of Iranian ports anymore. That is a blockade of global oil trade. And the country caught most visibly in the middle of this right now is Pakistan, which imports 80% of its oil through the same waters these ships are now being stopped in. Petrol already went up 55 rupees in a single day back in March, the largest hike in Pakistan's history. Since February, the pump prices are up 66%, and the ceasefire holding all of this together expires in 6 days. But before we get into all of this, if you find my videos useful, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share my videos with more people like yourself. Now, to understand where we are, a quick recap. On February 28th, the US and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury against Iran. Iran retaliated by closing the Strait of Hormuz, shutting down roughly 20% of world's daily oil supply. The IEA described what followed as the greatest global energy security challenge in history. A ceasefire was announced on April 8th, but a ceasefire is not peace. It's a pause. And while the pause has been holding barely, the US didn't lift its naval blockade. Instead, it escalated it. When the blockade was first announced on Monday, Brent crude jumped 7% to $102 a barrel, a 40% gain since the war began. WTI, the US benchmark, climbed to $104. For context, before Operation Epic Fury, WTI was sitting only at around $68. Now let's talk about what's actually changed this week, because the move Washington made is being underreported. Initially, the US blockade targeted ships moving in and out of Iranian ports specifically. That was already aggressive, but it had a geographic logic to it. What happened Thursday is different. US Naval Forces Central Command issued new guidance saying that Iranian-flagged vessels under OFAC sanctions, and vessels suspected of carrying contraband in any location, including international waters, are now subject to boarding, search, and seizure. The definition of contraband is the part that should alarm everyone. It includes weapons, yes, but it also explicitly includes petroleum products and lubricants because, and I'll read this directly, they are essential to military operations and contribute to Iran's war-sustaining economy. There's also a catch-all clause. Contraband is anything susceptible to use in armed conflict. That is a legal framework so broad it could theoretically cover a cargo ship carrying fuel oil to Bangladesh or LNG headed to South Korea. The definition of who gets targeted is now almost entirely discretionary. In the first 48 hours of the blockade, US forces turned around 13 ships. General Dan Kane confirmed that more than 10,000 US service members are now involved in this operation, with more en route. And Hegseth in the Thursday briefing made clear that this isn't ending soon. His words, for as long as it takes. Now they have already given this phase a name, Operation Economic Fury. That is not subtle. That is a deliberate effort to strangle Iran's oil revenues while applying maximum pressure before the April 22nd ceasefire deadline. Now here's the Austrian economics angle, because this is the part nobody else in mainstream media is talking about. What Washington is doing is using naval force to override price signals in the global energy market. When a government, any government, uses coercion to redirect the flow of oil, it doesn't make oil disappear. It creates artificial scarcity, drives up prices, and forces market participants to find workarounds. We saw this with Russia in 2022. the Russian oil didn't stop flowing. It just rerouted through India and China at a discount. The price cap didn't cap prices globally. It just redistributed the pain. Now, the same thing is happening here, except at a much larger scale, because the Strait of Hormuz is not just a pipeline that you can reroute. It is a 34-kilometer wide choke point that 20 million barrels pass through every single day. IEA data shows that Hormuz crude exports dropped from roughly 16 million barrels per day down to just 1.9 million barrels per day once the conflict disrupted the strait. There's no pipeline in the world that replaces that volume. The market has no substitute. IMF modeling suggests that if the Persian Gulf supply disruption lasts 2 quarters, WTI could peak at about $132 per barrel. Some Wall Street analysts are talking about $200 barrel as a tail scenario. The refinery product markets, such as diesel and jet fuel, are already showing those kinds of numbers in some Asian markets. The IMF has already cut Iran's growth forecast by 7.2 percentage points, projecting a 6.1% contraction. Saudi Arabia's forecast was cut from 4.5% to just 3.1%. From the Middle East and Central Asia as a whole, 2026 growth was slashed by 2 full percentage points. These are countries that produce the oil. Imagine what it's doing to countries that have to buy it, which brings us to countries caught in the middle of it all. Pakistan imports over 80% of its oil through these waters. Petrol prices there are up 66% this February, the largest sustained fuel shock in the country's history. Bangladesh is rationing. Sri Lanka declared Wednesdays a public holiday to conserve fuel. These are countries that had no vote in starting these wars and have no seat at any negotiating table. What's unusual, however, is that Pakistan has managed to turn its geographic and diplomatic position into actual leverage. Army Chief Asim Munir flew to Tehran this week carrying a message from Washington. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is simultaneously on a Gulf tour working Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Pakistan's foreign ministry confirmed that the US and Iran are in active discussions through Islamabad to arrange a second round of talks, though no date has been set yet. Trump publicly praised Munir's role, which tells you the back channels are still alive. But locked and loaded and choose wisely are phrases you say when you want pressure, not when you are confident a deal is coming through. Now here's what to watch for. If a second round of talks is announced before April 22nd and held in Islamabad, that is a genuine diplomatic win and oil prices will drop. If the ceasefire expires without a new date, the blockade becomes the default and the next leg up in oil prices is coming straight to your pump. The deeper lesson from all of this is that price controls don't work. Military blockades don't make commodities disappear. And the countries caught in the middle of it all, the ones that didn't start this war and have no say in how it ends, are the ones paying for it at the pump every single day. And finally, if this video gave you something to think about, share it, because most people are getting this story filtered through whoever's narrative they already follow. The actual mechanics of what's happening at Hormuz, what it legally means, and why Pakistan's role actually matters, that's not what's leading the news. Like the video, subscribe if you want to keep up with how this develops, and drop your thoughts in the comment section below. See you in the next one.